Welcome back to Registered America. We're talking about what happens when you get charged. That's the moment where, whether it's a phone call, whether it's in person, whether you heard it from the grapevine, this is a moment where your life really is about to change. And there's a few things you can do to make it go better, but it's probably not going to go great. But you can at least minimize making it worse. So, what happens when you get charged?
You go insane.
You do go insane. Actually, the world, it's kind of like time bends or any kind of it is surreal.
And it's the time when you make your worst decisions if you don't think them through.
That's why we're going to talk about it, because my hope is that somebody listens to this and they are being charged and they aren't sure what to do. There'll probably be people that listen to this that have already been charged and have something to say. But I truly believe that there is no real education about what happens when you get charged before you get charged. And I think the system knows that and they use that to their advantage. Again, I do have trouble when I sound like I'm down on enforcement, but the thing to know is that their job has nothing to do with really what happens to your life. Their job is to finish something and move on to the next something. And they
Mhm.
want to just get it swept and moved and cleared.
Well, and although you may be led to believe so, kind of like we talked about a little bit in the last conversation, their job has nothing to do with whether you are actually guilty or innocent at that point. If you've been charged, they're assuming you're guilty.
Good. So here's a good point. Being charged is not being sentenced, or this is all preliminary.
Mhm.
And again, we're not lawyers. We're not law enforcement officers. I think that's probably obvious. What we are, though, is empathetic
Right,
to how
right.
you're about to feel. And people are going to say things, man, this is really a hard time to get advice. And by the way, you already know if you're being charged. You can already think of people you don't want to know about this.
Mhm.
And you should approach everybody with that same feeling of it's really shut your mouth. Don't say
Yep,
anything.
right.
Because whatever you've said or done to get yourself charged is plenty. Don't add to it. The
Yeah.
only person you should talk to at this point is a lawyer. And
Mhm.
I think what's interesting is we always think, well, a lawyer's going to be so expensive.
Yeah.
A lawyer isn't going to cost anything compared to what you're about to potentially lose.
Well, and don't just talk to any lawyer, right? I mean, you want the lawyer experienced in this particular area of the law or whatever particular area of the law you're being charged in. You want somebody who knows that area of the law, and not everybody does, particularly when it comes to registry situations or situations that got you there.
How do you this comes up it comes up forever after anytime you talk to anybody. Yeah, you start to talk about lawyers and what they were able to do, and I mean, how do you properly search for a lawyer?
Yeah, I think you have to go to trusted sources if you know other people who have faced similar charges. You can get a good idea. You can look and see, particularly what cases in the appellate court have been prosecuted or defended by what lawyers and what success they have. You can also go to organizations that may have an interest in that area. Some organizations maintain a list of attorneys that may be helpful. Um, but I certainly wouldn't just pick them out of the phone book. I guess if you're going to pick them out of the phone book, you probably want a former prosecutor that has good experience and negotiating power, and you have enough money to pay him to use that power.
Well, and I think you just brought up some good points, and that is that if you are being charged,
Mm-hmm.
again, think about in which way you found out you're being charged. Were
Mm-hmm.
you handcuffed on site?
Yeah.
Were you called? Because if you're handcuffed on site, that means you're headed down to a booking station and you can't listen to this podcast or do anything else that you wish you could do,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's actually the most problematic, right? Because you are now you have no longer really have access to time and resources, and I think that's part of the strategy of the system is to
Yeah.
remove your ability to think clearly and just get you to do the knee-jerk reaction, maybe confess,
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of stuff you're not going to be proud of.
Well, and I think an important point, maybe we'll backtrack a little bit later, but I think an important point is if you are charged, you are probably going to be charged with the highest level of crime they think they have any hope of prosecuting, and perhaps with multiple charges, because end game is if they can dispose of it quickly through a plea agreement by bargaining you or appearing to bargain down to a certain level, then they don't have to do any work essentially to get the conviction.
Right. And again, if this is your first time being charged, a lot of this is going to sound really strange,
Mm,
unfamiliar, and again, the system knows if this
mm,
is they're and one of the things I find interesting, let's say you get pulled over and they get on their laptop in their car.
mm,
I don't know. Do we know how much information they're accessing about you in that moment?
mm. Well, again, if we're talking about the registry, I know that pops up.
Okay. But if you've never been charged, you're not on the registry yet. And I still contend that there are people being charged today, right
Mm,
now,
yeah,
with a sex crime, and they're not on the registry.
yeah.
They're going to get added. And then in 5 minutes, another person will get charged that's not on the registry, and they're going to get added.
Well,
And you
yeah,
can see how you're just adding people, but you're not really finding people that are on it. You're just adding people. But
right.
that's a separate conversation. So let's say you've never been charged. You're not going to be on the registry. They're not going to know much about you. They're just going to know the charges. And yeah, they're going to assume you did it, especially if you're a man. You're already
Yeah.
guilty because you're a man.
Well, any other criminal history that you might have had, or any traffic infractions or whatever, those are all going to pull up as well. So, say you were a bad little boy and when you turned 18 and you did some of this and some of that, and that's all going to pull up. So they're going to have a preconceived notion of who you are if you do happen to have any criminal history at all, no matter what it is. And if you don't, there is profiling often as well based on your ethnicity or whatever. Unfortunately, even in 2026, that's true, right?
Right? Well, I'm going to say one of the reasons, again, why I think that this is an interesting moment is that I was not arrested or detained at the time of
Mm-hmm.
assumption of guilt.
Yeah.
I received a phone call, then I had the opportunity to seek counsel. So I had those opportunities, time, resources.
Hmm.
But what I don't know is how common or uncommon that is.
Well, I think it can be quite common, and I guess I didn't share a few things in that direction because I thought we were past that. But when you're first alerted to the charge, you are going to be called in, and or they're going to try and call you in to try and get you to confess. You're going to get a phone call or something, them wanting to talk to you to purportedly clarify things, and to see if there's any reason why this thing could have come up. But if they're already convinced, they're probably going to be looking for additional information that they can get you to give them um, without any sort of effort, by pretending to be your friends. So you need to be cautious, and as we have mentioned earlier, don't share anything without consulting an attorney first.
Well, right. And they're going to want to move quickly. So you have to move quickly as well. And I think what I've seen is that even if you get an attorney that doesn't end up being your long term attorney,
Yeah.
just have any attorney with you anytime you have, let's say you agree to go down to the station. You're trying to be a normal person, which you are. It's just that now you've got some abnormal circumstances, and you have to go down to the station, right? Because you want to be cooperative and you want to get this past you. You're not even sure, and that's part of the problem. You're not even sure that you've really done something that you consider criminal.
Yeah.
Which is also interesting because, again, most of society, they're gonna, whatever was just said, they're just gonna skip it because that can't be possible. How could you be accused of something you didn't do? Which is interesting because the more and more we move forward with political awareness, it's weird how we have a president who could do whatever the fuck he wants, but if you do a tenth of that, you're under a microscope. It is strange. And I'm not afraid to talk about it. I think more and more people are unafraid to talk about it because it is really unfair to the name of the law, which we thought we all understood.
Well, and of course, this isn't a new phenomenon. I mean, unfortunately, most everybody is above the law that's in any sort of office at this point in time. I had a young cousin who was charged with something, and shortly after his 18th birthday. But on the other hand, there was another young man about the same age that was charged at about the same time, and he had political connections, and so the weight of justice was unequally administered between the two of them.
Yeah. Well, and there are plenty of politicians, powerful people, and even law enforcement. It's amazing if you get a cop or a firefighter that ends up
Mm-hmm.
in these somewhat common sex crimes, they're fine. They're
Yeah.
good. It's not a problem. But having said that, so you know if you're one of the normal regular people, you need a lawyer. Do not talk to the police without a lawyer. Just don't do it. It
Right.
If you think it's too expensive to call an attorney, wait till you talk to the police without one. You're going to realize you would have paid 10 times that. You're going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
wish. Cuz
Well, and
once they get you in there alone, it doesn't matter. It no longer matters what you think.
you're talking about years of potentially years of your life that are going to be absorbed in this. I know that between the charging with my crime and the time that I was sentenced was an entire year. And then I did, sentence and the rest of it. So, um, you're talking about a period of 12, 15 years, that my life was affected. And part of that because I wasn't smart enough to even recognize. I mean, I ended up they got me to end up pleading to a crime that wasn't that the crime didn't even meet the definition of the felony charge.
So you've just raised 2 points. One is the timeline, and two is the charges. Let's go into the timeline first. This is something that normal people also don't understand. In normal life, if you have to wait for 5 minutes, that's a long, long time. People don't wait 5 minutes for anything, whether it's in line, which more and more we don't even have to stand in a line, right? And when we do, my gosh, you've got like 5 seconds. Have you seen people walk into a store and get in line? They give you 5 seconds or less to get to them and take care of things. So let's move off of 5 seconds to 5 minutes. Actually, let's go to 5 hours. Let's go to 5 days. Let's go to 5 weeks. Because when you enter the system and you're waiting, it is days and weeks that turn into
Mm-hmm.
months and years. And this is something, I mean, people just don't know. You are now no longer in normal time. You're in for
Yeah.
days, weeks, months, and years. And so I think that's another
Mm-hmm.
problem when you talk to normal people. They're like, "Oh, did you get it cleared up?" You're like, "No. We haven't I don't even know what all the
Mm-hmm.
charges are yet." What?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah.
Well,
Welcome to
and
molasses.
there's hearing after hearing after hearing, and even before you're charged, if you're arrested and thrown into the drunk tank, you could be waiting for hours or days before you're um, even either released or given an opportunity to be released on bond. You know.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. Let's say you are arrested or detained and brought into the drunk tank. And
Mm,
for anybody that doesn't know, the drunk tank is literally the first cell you enter, and it can be anybody can be in there for any reason,
mm,
for
right.
any amount of time. There are no rules anymore. Once you go in the drunk tank, you don't know anything. I think there's a phone on the wall, which you may or may not want to use. And if you do use the phone, everybody can hear what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
They can't hear the other person on the other line, but you are no longer in normal town.
Well, and even if nobody's around, uh, all
The
phone calls in and
are
out
recorded.
are recorded.
And as some of us learn at some point, yeah, no, they're listening. They want you to talk on that phone.
Mhm. I
I'm
mean,
surprised they don't
the
put a
only
bunch of phones in that room.
well, they probably had. Well, I mean, generally there's a camera and a microphone for those rooms anyway. So
Right.
you're generally on camera, and the only exception to all that would be if an attorney comes or calls you and goes through the proper channels to have you pulled out into an office where your conversation with the attorney is not recorded.
And that will be a lot of logistics to
Mm-hmm.
get to, right?
Yeah. Yep.
To get the attorney down there, to get a room. Yeah, it's so
Or to get well, in DOC it would be like your counselor, but to get some personnel at the jail, say, to even arrange the phone call at a time when they're willing to pull you out of the cell and take you into the office to have the phone call, or unless the attorney comes down and they put you in a little glassed in room with them and have the call or the talk then.
and again, you've only been charged. There's
Yeah.
no proof of what happened. Well, there's nothing has been proven. There may be
Correct.
proof, there may be witnesses, maybe it's indisputable, but you're literally at the beginning. Yes, and
Yeah.
by the time you get sentenced, which is that's another conversation, it could probably be a year actually. I think that's
Yeah.
probably common. Year and a half, right?
Some people even longer than that. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say that's very common. For one thing, the court system is backed up tremendously, and they don't seem to want to do anything about alleviating that by, there are places where now they're doing like drug courts or alternative sentencing type of things, but in the mainstream, particularly if you're in a metropolitan area, there could be hundreds of cases that month ahead of you, as well as the ones that are backlogged before. So, you're also waiting on the court to be able to schedule you in as along with everything else.
I would also say let's go to the charges then, is that I want to be fair. I do
Yeah,
try to be fair. And in all fairness, I'm sure being law enforcement and conducting the job and trying to be specific and detailed and accurate, it can't be easy. I'm sure it's not. And so that's why your charges, when you get charged, may end up varying from the charges that you're convicted of. Because there are
sure.
plea deals. And, again, normal people think plea deals are some kind of backdoor politics. Not necessarily. It could be that the original charges just weren't. How about this? The sentence to the charges that you were originally charged with are not don't really match the crime. And so
Mm-hmm.
maybe a plea deal is going to better match the crime, which I think that overall, I think there's been too many years considered to be average sentencing. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think a teacher needs to go to prison for 20 years for having a pseudo relationship with a young teen. I just don't. That doesn't make sense to me. I
Yeah.
thought prisons were for hardened criminals, and I don't think a teacher kissing a 16-year-old is a hardened criminal. Call me
Yeah, they're not.
crazy.
They're not.
I mean, that's just dumb.
Well, and we could talk about why we have prisons and all of that minutia down the road, but the thing is, the what the police do is investigate a crime, right? And then they take that information to a prosecutor, and a prosecutor decides what you're going to be charged with, right? So, and that prosecutor wants a prosecution because it gives him brownie points. If he's going to charge you with something, he's going to want a conviction, flat and simple. And he really doesn't necessarily care what that conviction is unless it's a high profile crime. And, there are a lot of people beating down his door for a huge charge or conviction, but they're going to charge you with this, as I mentioned earlier. They're going to charge you with as many things as they possibly could think of. So you may have a level one or a level two or level three or level four or whatever crime that you're charged with. Likely, if it's a C or a level three, I'm sorry, when I was sentenced, they were like ABCs. Now they're one, two, threes. But anyway, if you're like a mid-level crime that you're being charged at, that's actually probably where you are. If they can charge you with a high-level crime or two, then they can use that as bargaining bait for you to take the plea at the level of crime that they would normally want to get the conviction at. So it's all a tool in their bag to get you to accept some sort of plea that's within the range that they think that they can fall back on as fodder for their next campaign or as proving that they're doing their job well.
And I don't think we've talked about this, but that's exactly how I would describe it. And I did learn a little bit more about the prosecutor on my case, and he did not care about me or any context. He
Yeah,
literally was trying to just, yeah, score the most points he could. My lawyer even said so.
yeah.
And that's what it seemed like to me. Even the judge double taked and said, "Are you sure?"
Well, and here's an interesting point. You talking about even your lawyer said, if you're in a relatively small area, probably even if you're not in a relatively small area, They all know each other. They all go to coffee with each other, probably are members of the Lions Club together, so the prosecutor and your attorney are probably not adversarial in real life, and so they're gonna chat about you over coffee or a beer at the local tavern and try and both come out in a way that looks like they've done their job well. And so, as I say, unless you have the money and the influence to buy the brownie points that relationship can bring, they're not going to utilize their uh, potential brownie points with somebody for just everybody that walks into their office. If you want the brownie points, you're going to pay for the goodwill, I guess is what I want to say. If you want the goodwill that a particular attorney can bring, you got to be in a position to get the attorney or to reward the attorney for using that goodwill.
No, and I agree with you in that there's a behind the scenes aspect of the system between the attorneys, the judges, prosecutor, the police, etc., that the average person doesn't understand, but it is an ecosystem that knows each other, especially if you've been charged, if you're now in the system and you spend enough time in the court building, just in the hallway, in the courtroom, you'll see these people know each other. They see each other Monday through Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, there's absolutely conversations you'll never be privy to that may or may not
Yeah.
really affect what happens next.
Well, I characterize it as the good old boys club. It does exist at all levels of government and even in the legislative end of things. It's the good
And
old boys club, right?
it can help you. I'm not
Oh yeah, yeah.
completely dismissing it.
No, well,
But
it's just like any.
and that's
It's
another
just
reason
like
why
any,
you want a good lawyer that knows some
yeah,
people. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like any other business. You know somebody, and you're going to be able to parlay favors on certain things, but you can't parlay those favors for everybody. And so you're going to utilize them well. I'm not saying it's an entirely bad thing, but it is something that most of us don't understand about the system when we're first exposed to it.
And that probably when if you do go public defender, they know that too.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if you do go to the hearing, which you follow your attorney's advice, there's going to be some stuff you have to go to, and you'll notice that on the docket before you, how many people are on a warrant that didn't show up. It's crazy how many outstanding warrants there are at any given time. That's how
oh
many
yeah,
people are in the system and they're not playing by the rules.
yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, that's the reason that they want to dispose of cases as quickly as possible. It's time consuming to go to trial. Whether you're in there for a couple hours or a couple days, it's time consuming. And if they can shorten that time by getting you to sign a piece of paper, it's to their advantage and the court's advantage to process people through more quickly, and it accomplishes the purposes that they have in mind.
Which again is why you don't want to do anything without consulting an attorney, because you want an attorney to say, take the plea deal.
Yeah, but again, you want an attorney that, uh, yes, they have the goodwill, but they're actually advising you from a place of kind of, I don't know,
Well, meaning
they
that you need to be offered a plea deal that's worth taking, and your
right.
attorney should be able to negotiate that on your behalf.
Yeah, but again, caution, they don't always,
Totally. Yeah.
particularly if they're a public defender.
Right. And so if you're not sure, call another lawyer. The only time it's too late is after you're sentenced.
Yeah, yeah,
Then this because I know, I mean, there's an appeals process, but that is a much different. I'm not very familiar with it, but
and that
my understanding. I mean, that's a totally different situation.
and that is a multi-year process as well.
Right. Oh
You
yeah. If
you're not gonna get a even a ruling on your appeal until you've been incarcerated for some
in
time.
in fact, if you want to play the game, think down the future, a year, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, when you're talking to some other folks now, and they start comparing attorneys, and you're gonna hit a moment where you're like, oh my gosh, did I get a good enough attorney?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
everybody feels that at one point or another.
And again, even if you have a good attorney, that doesn't mean they're a good attorney in the SL market. I mean, you can have good attorneys that don't even begin to comprehend the extensiveness of sex offense convictions and the ongoing consequences that nobody wants to necessarily tell you about. So you may think you're getting in and out, and they may indicate you're going to be, say, off the registry in 10 years, and then you turn around and get out after serving your sentence and find out that you're on the registry for life, or or whatever.
Well, no, that's absolutely true. So let's dive in further on the registry stuff. When it comes to registry and charges thereof, uh number one, the registration is a moving target, and you don't really
Mm,
know that at the time.
yeah.
But what's true now will probably change 10
Mm,
years from now,
yeah.
and then 10 years from then, etc. That's a problem. But I think when it comes to attorneys, yes, what you want to do is if you're facing a sex crime charge, you want to have an attorney that can have a pretty honest conversation and talk about those difficult things as far as sex offender registration, what sex offenders go through. Does your attorney understand sex offender life? Because many I don't think do. They just
Yeah.
add it to their list of menu services they offer, but they're not really sex crime specialists.
Well, if you go into an attorney's office and you say, well, how much parole time will I do? I mean, some of them may base that on other crimes that are not calculated the same way for good time, for example. I mean, in the state that I live in, if you are incarcerated for a sex offense, chances are you're going to receive less good time. And when I say that, I mean that um, most states will give you good behavior credit against your sentence um, for every day that you serve. And generally, that may be 1 day for 1 day. So you end up doing half your sentence. But in the case of registrants, it can often be 75% or no percent, and you're doing day for day on your sentence. So it can make a big difference in how long you're actually down state, as well as, affecting other areas of your life after you've been released.
One of the other things that I think I came across over time was once you get charged,
Mm-hmm.
they take it from there. Meaning, like, even if a victim the next
Mm-hmm.
day goes, oh no, wait, no, I'm gonna take that back. Too late. The ball is now in play.
Yeah.
So for somebody that wants to play with the idea of charging somebody under false pretenses,
Yeah.
once you release that rocket, they're going to run with it now. It doesn't matter. And that's also, I think, one of the things I don't think normal people understand about the system is that once a charge or investigation starts, you can't stop it.
Well, an individual does not bring charges against another individual. It's the state of Okeechobee or wherever you happen to be from, or the people of Okeechobee or whatever that are bringing the charges against you. It's not an individual. The only time it's an individual that's bringing charges against you is if you're in civil court, right?
Yeah, true. So I find that interesting. So I guess I guess it comes down to this. I want to talk about advice, but this one story I tell this story all the time. I may have already talked about it once. I'll tell it again. Is that there was a guy? I was in a group. I was in like a just a support group. I didn't have to be there. It was voluntary. I just at this point, that's part of this podcast too. Is that I talk about this stuff because I don't have to, but it's not only fascinating, but I know that somebody right now is getting questioned and they don't know what to do or say or think. They think their life is over. They know they did something wrong and they actually don't know who do they talk to about it? What do they do? They don't know a lawyer. And it's freaky. It's scary. It's so scary that you come to realize the feeling of mortality.
Mm,
It may be the first moment in your life you've ever felt mortally wounded.
yeah.
It is like being critically injured. It's like, you're about to lose a leg. Here we go. So this guy was in this support group, and this was a church group. And I have always found that when church or religion are in the realm, it's different. Meaning, if you were in like a holding cell for people that went to church, it would be different than a holding cell of randos. Okay. So we're in because I've been in regular support groups, but this was a church support group, so it had that extra level of church. And this guy was saying that he knows he did wrong, but he's leaving it in God's hands. And even there, at this church support group, I think even the churchness started to dissolve because some people are like, okay, man, what are you saying? And he's like, well, I'm just saying I'm going to put it in God's hands. Okay. So I know at least I was thinking, okay, are you saying that to other people then too? Because you're almost confessing. If you're saying you're putting it in God's hands, you're kind of confessing, which is fine. That's great for your personal morality, but it's not going to help your case. And I was thinking, if you're currently being charged, that means you're no longer your case hasn't been disposed or right. There's no. I would not be at a church support group saying I'm putting it in God's hands. In fact, I could see an investigation later on of us church guys being called in and the investigator say, okay, so what did he say in your support group? Well, he said he's going to put it in God's hands. All right, what did he mean by that? Well, it sounds like he meant that he felt like he did something wrong and he's putting it in God's hands. Well, that sounds like a confession. Did it sound like he was confessing?
Well,
Yeah,
and
actually.
beyond that aspect, I guess I wouldn't have gone there with that. But what is problematic to me about that statement, and this is coming from a person I have a faith as well, and I believe in putting trust in a higher power, but I also believe that in that circumstance, I may put my trust in God's hands for what happens with my life with God, but I'm not putting my trust in God's hands for what happens with my life with people. because we are in a flawed world and not everything operates according to God's hands. And I believe that we have a free agency. And so he's not going to step in and change things all the time. There are plenty of people who are innocent that get charged and suffer the consequences. So, I mean, that's what's more problematic for me about that statement is just you have to be proactive in anything that involves a legal charge.
Well, I'm glad we're talking about this because putting it in God's hands could probably be its own podcast episode, because I will tell you that there was that layer where I know I wasn't alone in thinking maybe part of the reason you're here is you haven't really been putting anything in God's hands. And now you're betting it all on God.
Eat that bunny. I mean,
Yeah.
that's so true, so true. Oh, well, all of a sudden I'm going to put it in God's hands when I haven't really put much else there.
Yeah.
So, not judging anyone,
I'm not,
but
and I'm
certainly,
not either. But that is part of, and I think it's almost like a come to Jesus moment, because I think probably people started to think internally, God, have
mhm,
I have I been that?
yeah. Yeah,
Like,
and that's what happens in crisis. I mean, you turn to God or a higher power, or you make promises to yourself, or you panic, as we talked about earlier. In crisis, and you don't think clearly, and all of a sudden you're expecting some higher power to step out, of the cloud and save you from that, and that's just not how it works.
and so you aren't going to get any, you're not going to score any points by
Yeah,
letting people know how shitty you feel
right,
before you're charged.
right.
Don't tell anybody that. It's part of the cross you will have to bear.
Yeah,
I mean, you're going to have your chance to apologize in court before you go into the prison elevator and all that stuff. But while you're being charged and investigated, this is no time to share how shitty you feel. But hopefully you do feel shitty. And
yeah.
hopefully this is the last time you're accused of doing something that made you feel so shitty.
Well, assuming that you actually did the crime as well,
Good
right?
point. Playing the attorney. That's right. And you made it, but I will say there's no way this guy's sitting at church saying he's putting it in God's hands if he didn't do anything.
Right, exactly.
And that was also part of the problem is we're listening to this and we're like, well, clearly you did something. You're putting it in God's hands. Not to mention, I'll just add this, that what he was accused of doing was so egregious that I think it made people in the group kind of shudder. We didn't know for quite a while what he was talking about, but it was in his own family, right? And this is when you get into, this is when you cross, and and I'm also not judging. I'm not. This is tough stuff because you can't, it's funny. We hear the heart wants what the heart wants, and we're cool with that in society until we find out some of the stuff the heart wants, and then we're like, oh my God, what happened? But, right? But
Right.
and you know what? And when you get into the stepdaughter, stepmother thing, that's another area where you're not blood relatives. So society can't digest it the way you do in the moment, right? The heart wants what the heart wants. And I think in his situation, he was a stepdad. So he's a stepdad. He gets in the moment. However, when we find out what he did, because I think he finally told us, and that was the last time I saw the guy. And I felt really bad for him because I bet he's still in the system, and that was a long time ago. But when he shared what he did, there was no need to do that. It didn't just happen. And that's part of the problem too, is when you get charged, take a moment to look at were what were the circumstances? Because if it was you running solo, right, with a you're right, you're in charge of doing something that is going to get hashed and rehashed and rehashed. So once your story gets told, that better be the story. Because if it changes,
Well, even if it doesn't change, again, I guess this is where it comes back to your attorney and following sound advice is sometimes you think you can explain your way out of something or minimize the damage by sharing a bunch of information. And that is usually the worst course of action you can possibly take.
that's correct. And in fact, I was tempted to reach out to somebody to try to explain myself. And I came close to sending off an email, and I'm so glad that I did not do that.
Yeah.
Don't send an email. Don't
I
make a
sent
phone call.
I sent the emails and they showed up in court.
There you go. So anything you say can,
Will be
and
used.
it's not even a can. It will be used against you. And
Exactly.
it and the context is gone.
And anything you say to anybody that could possibly be called in to court. So, it's good to have a confidant, but make sure your confidant is someone that's somehow insulated from that process, which is generally only an attorney.
Well, I was just saying, what you have to do is, if you get charged,
Yeah.
you have to now, your life has changed, and you're going to have to go into like almost like incognito double agent, don't fucking say anything mode. And you don't want to do it. You're going to want to put it in God's hands. And there'll be plenty of time for that later. But don't
Yeah.
say anything, because your silence can actually make things better.
Well, and a point too, going backwards a bit, is that even an attorney can say something that might damage you if that attorney has not officially been hired by you. You have to retain the attorney before that client privilege kicks in. So, you want to make sure that if you're just kind of like exploring attorneys, you don't get into the deep weeds until after you've actually retained that person.
There is somebody right now, probably just out of high school,
Yeah.
and they just got charged, and they're being questioned, they're being investigated. They know they've done something wrong, and they have no idea what to do.
Yeah.
Don't talk. Find a good attorney. That's actually the only thing you should be working on, is find a good attorney. And if you don't think you can afford them, I don't know. What do you
Well,
do? Let's say you
well,
don't think you can afford
even
it. Yeah.
even ma and pa can be called in to testify against you. I think the only exception is a spouse. You know, so you've
Wow.
got marriage. That marriage bond kind of excludes them being able to testify against you, but even a parent could be called in to testify against you or a sibling.
Wow. So let's say, so you're a freshman in college. You've been charged with, let's say you've been charged with you were on a date, and you've been accused of date rape,
Yeah.
and you're a freshman in college, and you
Yep.
call your mom and you say, "Oh my God, mom, here's what happened. I don't think I did it. I'm being accused." And your mom says, "God, I don't know. That sounds pretty questionable." You're saying then the police can ask the mom, "What was the conversation? Tell me the conversation."
Yeah, and and
Wow.
probably going back to mom, most moms are going to think, okay, well, honey, go down and talk to the police officer and be honest with him, and
That's
everything will
right.
be okay,
That's right.
you know? Or on the other hand, if something happens, um, something happens that a child does something or a young college student does something, and mom thinks, well, if I can have them go in front of the police officer, that's going to scare them. So the situation's not going to get out of hand. Well, it may scare you too down the road, mom, because you're opening up a can of worms that you don't know you're opening up.
Well, and there's the thing is, so let's say the date goes to campus police and makes a report.
Yeah,
The rocket has been launched.
right,
She can take it back all she wants, but from it's now a case, right? Because
right.
the college, they can't take the risk of it being legit.
Well, and in those cases, a lot of times too, then the police or the prosecutor will even intimidate the victim often, that they, if they're withholding information from the police, they could be charged with something. So, it's kind of rock and a hard place for the victim as well. Once you, once you open that can of worms, it's difficult to stuff those worms back inside of it, which, when from a legal or a legislative point of view, a lot of times, prosecutors make or legislators make these laws, and they're thinking they're helping victims or saving victims of some kind, when yet they often put the victims in a position of having to decide whether to bring it up or not, because they really don't want someone, particularly if it's a loved one, being charged with something that's going to send them away for years.
Uh, I was gonna say that it sounds. I've noticed this before, and I'm noticing again now that it sounds like it's the prosecutor which is the least understood by the average person, right? What does the
Mm-hmm.
average person know about prosecutors? Nothing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I mean, we assume they're just like, what? Very, very smart super cops. But that is
Or,
not. They're
yeah,
politicians, aren't they?
well, sure. Anybody in public office that can get that their job is dependent on upon being reelected is a politician, right?
So, do you want a politician at the wheel of sentencing?
Mm-hmm.
That's why there's judges, right?
Well, and
Because
we
if
think, well,
prosecutors were in charge, you'd really be in trouble.
there are judges, but they're also politicians
Are
because
they
they're
ex
reelected.
prosecutors?
Some of them are, or
Some of
some,
them
yeah,
are.
some of them are. I mean, and often, people move around within offices. So who was the prosecutor last week? Maybe something else next week, or who was the judge last week? I mean, usually a judge will stay there, but I mean, they move around, and so it's all political to a large degree, and you have to be able to play the political game or find someone who's capable of playing it on your behalf, hopefully to your advantage, or at least to your minimal damage.
Right, minimal. Hey, I was going to say I think you're right. If you are researching attorneys and you can find a former prosecutor, go with that one.
Well, it's because they have the connections. That's again, it's buying that goodwill is what you're doing. They may not
Well,
have the knowledge, but they have the goodwill, so they can buy the goodwill. So short of somebody that has the knowledge, and even if you find somebody that has the knowledge, if they don't have the goodwill, you may be in just as bad a boat. So yeah.
well, but they're also going to know some of the strategies and maybe some of the
Mm-hmm.
weak points.
Right. Yeah.
Or a district attorney or a city attorney. But yeah, somebody who's been on the other side. The best
Yeah.
defense is a good offense.
Because again, I mean, it's the paycheck they're looking at. They're not, you know, the paycheck is right, then their goodwill is right, or their best advice is right, or whatever. I mean, it's sad to say it, but it's downline bottom line. It's getting down, as they say, to brass tacks. You know.
Oh, it's real. The stress is insane. It's even hard. It can even get hard to think straight, which is
Yeah.
another reason why you need an attorney at the wheel,
Yeah.
because this is going to be, and then once if you have a family, whatever your family is, they're all going to freak out. It's going to be
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is extremely difficult time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're right. Mom may want you to go talk to the police. I think dad's going to say, let's talk to an attorney. So find somebody, find the most serious person in your family
Mm-hmm.
and ask them if they know an attorney. Don't
And
tell them the details of what happened. Just tell them overall what's going on and that you need an attorney. Because
and in
you
some
made a good point. They could
yeah,
get called.
and in some respects, the most business savvy person in your family.
Well,
You
no, I
know.
agree with that. Absolutely. And if let's say it's a cousin or some other part, but yes, you want to find you want to find a business law PhD, because this is going to be a completely different, this is not something you can talk your way out of. And I think that's actually where kind of a lot of true crime content comes out of people trying to talk themselves out of things, and you can
Yeah.
watch as many as you want, none of them do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and in some respects too, maybe having, as you mentioned, maybe an uncle or somebody who's one step removed from the immediate family or the immediate circle, it can add some clarity to things as well.
And it's going to happen. There's going to be
Mm.
there's another one right now. This is
Yep.
actually something this is also one of the reasons I talk about this stuff, is that I think we're raised to believe that only bad people commit crimes or whatever, and that is
Mm-hmm.
not how the world works.
Yeah. Well, think about your high school locker room before you say that.
There you go. There you go. And yeah, and I'm just going to say this, is that, when I saw the hearings to confirm Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh,
Uh,
I thought, that guy's going to be a Supreme Court justice? How is this possible? Meaning, there is no level playing field for who you are, how you feel, what you've done, and what you're going to be held accountable for. I think there are also plenty of people that have very strong opinions that have never really been held accountable. And as karma would have it, some of them will. Very harshly. And the wheel just continues to spin. So if you've been caught up in it, it's unfortunate. I'm sorry for you that you've been caught up in it. And the police are even going to say to you, we know you're not a bad person. That's
mm,
correct. You are probably not a bad person. However, when they say it, they're trying to drop your guard to get you to confess. The fact is, I think there are very few truly bad people, but plenty of good people end up in pretty bad situations.
yeah, for sure.
This has been What Happens When You Get Charged. Thanks for listening to Registered America. We'll see you on the next one.